Are you a fan of the finest up-and-coming filmmakers that Scotland and the rest of the world has to offer? Then look no further than the Glasgow Film Festival. Glasgow short film. That Scotland and the rest of the world has to offer? Then look no further than the Glasgow Film Festival. Shit. It's a bit tatty, isn't it? Look no further than the Glasgow Glasgow Short Film Festival. I'll do that again, but the list for. You told me that this was a trailer for the Glasgow Film Festival. I shouldn't be doing this. Glasgow Film Festival, yes. The Edinburgh Film Festival, a push. But the Glasgow Short Film Festival, no. You listen to me. They're just diddy wee films. Things about your granny or your drunk dad. Guaranteed there'll be some foreign animation that nobody understands. That'll be winning a prize, don't you worry about that. Are you a fan of the finest up-and-coming filmmakers that Scotland and the rest of the world has to offer? Then look no further than the Glasgow Short Film Festival 2021. Give a lick of paint.
Welcome everyone to this live Q&A for Scottish Competition 4 under the Volcano. My name is Matt Lloyd and I'm delighted to be joined by 4 filmmakers tonight. We have Aliyah Gaffer, the director of Scuzz. We have Cameron Nichol, director of Rare Creatures. Kirsty MacLean, the director of Opal. And Rona Mulabach, director and star of Sudden Death. Unfortunately, Kieran Lyons, who made The Mad Shagger, couldn't join us tonight because he's shooting a film today. We called this program Under the Volcano because each film trembles with a highly charged atmosphere. We get the sense each time that something is about to erupt. If you haven't seen any of these films yet, they are available on demand at our festival hub until midnight tonight. Sorry, midnight tomorrow night. We're not quite there yet. You also have your chance to give your votes for the Audience Award once you've watched the whole program, but please make sure you do this before 4:30 p.m. tomorrow when the votes close. So while we're having the Q&A, if you have any questions for any of the filmmakers, you can tweet them to Glasgow Short, at Glasgow Short, or you can email questions@glasgowshort.org. And if you're watching this stream on Facebook, just post your questions in the comments and we'll pick them up there. I'd like to thank Louisa McDade, who's providing live captions for this session, and also Polona Kuzman, who's running our live stream. So welcome all of you. Thanks for joining me, all 4 of you. I'm going to ask some questions of each of you in turn, but feel free to jump in and ask your own questions as well. And as questions come in from other people, we'll kind of throw those in as well. And we're going to go through in program order. So we'll start with you, Aliyah. So Scuzz was your first film after winning the GSFF Short Film Award for Salt and Sauce in, was it 2018? That was?
Yes, yeah, long time ago, yeah.
Oh, Aliyah's frozen.
Am I okay now?
Oh, have we got you back?
I think so. The nature of
we can hear you.
You can hear me, but I'm frozen.
Well, just keep talking and exactly, you'll catch up. So like that film, so like Salt and Sauce, there's a kind of a sense of a coming of age to this film, or at least, or more kind of a transitioning from one stage of life to the next. Can you tell us a bit about the origins of the idea for this film?
Yeah, so I would say the origins of the idea for Scuzz, it kind of was a combination of things. I was spending a lot of time at that point, I think, going to gigs and going out a little bit too much, and sort of really thinking about Glasgow at night and its cinematic potential, or how dynamic I thought it was, and thinking it's not really something I've seen on screen, that music scene that we have, the nightlife here. So I think I was interested in having a story that was set within that world, and following on from that, something I was quite interested in was thinking about using some kind of chase element, and that being a sort of genre film element, you know, quite action movie-esque, but taking it in a totally different direction to become more like the kind of stories that I like to tell, which are sort of, yeah, I guess about these surprising connections that people can form. So it sort of became a combination of just wanting to explore these very different things. And I think through a lot of trial and error and trying to write a script, I knew I had this character, Kim. I wanted it to be a young woman that was the pursuer in this chase, because I also felt like I was interested in the idea of a young woman doing something that felt very brave or out of her element that she wouldn't normally do. And by taking that step, how does she change how she feels about herself and her situation? So it kind of stemmed from that. And I think, yeah, just by kind of shouting stuff aloud to my flatmate whilst I was writing and like deleting lots of stuff and yeah, going through a lot of versions, I ended up at this story of Kim, who, yeah, is a musician in a band, and she's feeling quite disenchanted with the scene that she's in, the people around her. The frontman of the band is her ex, Lee, and we can sense there's kind of gossip going on, and she just wants an escape from it. So a guitar being stolen and her having that as a sort of catalyst to have to take action and do something and prove herself in a way leads her on this journey to meet Ryan, the teenage boy who's stolen it, and forming a kind of surprising friendship where they both, I think, you know, they meet for one night and probably won't cross paths again, but learn something from each other or take something from that changes them in some small way, or at least, you know, challenges their perceptions of each other. So it kind of organically just formed, and it's quite hard to pinpoint from being interested in all that different stuff. But I applied with the project to Scottish Film Talent Network, their new talent scheme, and that's where I met my producer Laura McBride, and then developed the film with the execs there. So it sort of went on a journey with all those people's help as well.
And I mean, talking about the kind of the journey she goes on, it's really interesting to see how the relationship between the two of them develops. And I mean, it's not quite maternal, would be wrong, but I guess there's a sort of a big sisterly, you know, she feels some kind of sense of responsibility towards him by the end of the story, which is really lovely. Maybe you could talk a bit more about that.
Yeah, I think so. It was a dynamic that I was sort of interested in, because I guess, as I said, I'm interested in people that on the surface seem like they wouldn't have anything in common, and there's something about, yeah, this young woman that's in her early mid-20s in this sort of alternative kind of art school environment, and when she meets a teenage boy kind of from her hometown, who's very different. Yeah, it's sort of, she has this maternal instinct over him, I think, and becomes kind of, and she's endeared by him because I think she recognizes a bit of her younger self. Or I was interested in that feeling of when you're a teenager and you start to become interested in kind of certain music or films, and how that starts to shape you. And she kind of sees him, I think, as on the beginning of a bit of a journey to find himself through that. And by doing that, it sort of reminds her to think about who she is as an individual and where she comes from and who she is out with the scene she's in and this kind of circle of people that maybe have certain preconceptions about who she is. And I think it was just, they kind of maybe inspire each other, I hope, a little bit. I think Ryan inspires Kim to be brave and not really give a shit and stand up for herself. And Kim kind of inspires Ryan to, have a little bit more pride in who he is, or not be afraid to kind of explore what he's interested in further, even if it maybe strays from the norm and the kind of social environment he's in. And that sounds, when I actually talk about it, it sounds a lot more deep than I think the film is. But to be honest, I think those are the seeds that are in there, I hope, and what they kind of take from each other. And I think it's interesting. I'm really struck by, I had an experience when I was studying film at art school, and I went and did some work in a youth club with these teenage boys, and I really remember I was going to make a film with them, so I did some kind of little drama workshops and stuff like that. And I really remember this boy making fun of my green Doc Martens. And it just, for some reason, there's something about that moment where, because I was sort of used to being in this art school environment now with lots of people that wore Doc Marten shoes, I forgot how funny they are to some people. And it took me back to like my high school days where, if I wore shoes like that to school, I would have got the piss taken out of me. You know what I mean? And it's having that little reminder of who you are out with sometimes a setting that can feel a little bit materialistic or pretentious. I think sometimes I struggle, with reconciling being in these kind of like creative art school or filmmakery environments, and then thinking about actually, where I grew up and where I come from, and sort of trying to figure out who I am and amongst that. But sorry, I'm having an existential crisis.
That's all right. Can you tell us a bit about shooting in Glasgow City Centre at night time? I mean, I love that to some extent you do kind of maintain the right geography, I think. I mean, the chase sort of happens in an area that's pretty much believable, that they like wouldn't be completely knackered by the time they got to the underpass. Or am I remembering it wrong?
Yeah, I think we sort of just about get away with it. I really remember being told by Laura, the producer, and I'm sure Andrew, our DOP too, like, I think I was really concerned about geography, and I was like, oh, it needs to be so authentic. And they were like, no, it doesn't. Don't be stupid. Lots of people will see it that's not in Glasgow. But I don't know if they will really, actually, because here we're the Glasgow Short Film Festival, so everyone watching it probably knows. No, there's people from further afield. But I think I sort of took some liberties, but tried to not make it too crazy so they don't, turn a corner in the East End and then arrive somewhere in the West End. I tried to keep it to certain places in the city centre that felt like, okay, they could maybe just about have been running for all this time. I was a bit cheeky with how I did it, but I maybe just get away with it.
Was it a challenge shooting at night?
Yeah, it was really hard. I think it's that funny thing of being like, oh, I'd love to. Why have I not seen, films set in Glasgow at night with nightlife and, that feels like a Safdie Brothers film or something? Why isn't there anything like that? And I guess the answer is because it's really difficult and there's loads of drunk people all the time. So it was tricky. I had such amazing crew members though that they really like took a lot of that on, or kind of like protected me a little bit from all of it, so that I was really focused on what I was doing and working with actors and whatnot. But definitely, especially like our lovely locations guy Lyle and the producer Laura, they had a lot of chats with quite drunk people who are just really interested in what you're doing. They're just really excited, but it's like, I don't have time to talk to you about us making this film because we actually need to make it. So it was definitely a challenge, and we kind of had some little disasters where we were doing the chase stuff, and like our actress hurt her leg, which was a shame, and then there was a drunken brawl that kind of started in the middle of the street, and we had to like sort of run away. But no, I think everyone who worked on the film was really, just total troopers, and fought through it.
We've got a question from Conor McGregor. What was your working relationship like with Andrew O'Connor, the DOP, and what ideas were exchanged regarding the look of the film?
So I kind of knew Andrew before from working on shorts with my friend Martin Allison, who's a director who knew Andrew quite well from being at Napier and whatnot, studying film there. And we'd made some shorts that I'd co-written with Martin and produced. So I sort of knew him on I've worked with him, but not directly as a director, and knew him sort of personally, and just felt like he was very chilled out, and got on well. So I knew that he would be a good person to work with, just in terms of being able to speak to each other quite frankly, and just have that good rapport. In terms of the look, we chatted, we did shot list, but I think we were both quite up for being quite loose with our plans in terms of all the exterior stuff. I knew I kind of wanted to be largely handheld. There's some Steadicam stuff in there, and be able to just kind of make it look almost like we're catching it from the other side of the road, then just darting up the street, having it all feel quite organic and not too slick and a bit rough and ready was really important. And then having that contrast with the gig scene, where we're obviously going for quite a distinct look in terms of that neon light, and kind of using Steadicam to build this atmosphere of a bit of a tension. So we had a lot of chats about kind of Safdie Brothers films. I think I sent a lot of Trainspotting clips, actually. The clubbing scene in Trainspotting is really amazing. I think that was a big inspo. And kind of just like old 70s movies, New York at night, like looking at Taxi Driver and stuff outside and everything. But it was a really great collaboration, and I think he was very much up for anything. And we did quite long takes and stuff like that in terms of the underpass scene. And he was really happy just to keep shooting and kind of work with a performance, which is something that I really like to do. I think that's ideal if you can just let the actors keep going and really feel the scene out and just see what you capture. So it was great.
Cool, thank you. We have a question from Fiona Wallace, but I'm going to hold it back because it's maybe one for you and Kirsty to answer. So I'm going to hold that back for a while. But I'm going to talk to Cameron now about Rare Creatures. So tell us a bit about the origins of this project.
Well, I think the original sort of nugget of an idea came long before I started really thinking about it in the context of the final film that is in the program. But it was kind of this idea that I kind of wanted to go on a kind of road trip, or do some kind of like road movie documentary where I would kind of find myself in nature and like go out searching in particular for a rare animal, and the particular rare animal was the Scottish wildcat. And so I had this kind of like vague idea that I wanted to like get some friends of mine and go like, sit by, like the film would be me sitting by a campfire, sort of like thinking about myself. And then I kind of like, I was doing a master's in documentary making, which is on which I made this film. And so I was kind of thinking about what I could do for my graduation project, and I thought that I could maybe find someone else to go on a search for the Scottish wildcat. And I think it was the idea of going searching for something was like something intangible, and not expecting really to find it, but about sort of maybe finding something else along the way. And then so I talked to some people, some friends of mine who live in Kintyre, which is where the film was made, and they started telling me about this man who lives next door to them, who is an artist, and he spends all of his time day and night out in the woods, and has all these like bizarre experiences, and comes back to his little flat and paints what he has seen all over his walls. And I was like, okay, that'll be the film then. So I like immediately went up to the Highlands and kind of knocked on his door, and that was kind of the beginning of it. But when I was there, I was still thinking about the Scottish wildcat. I thought that people were talking about the wildcat, which is like a documented, known species of animal that lives in the Highlands. But then as soon as I got there, people were not talking about that, and people were talking about this unknown mystery animal, this sort of kind of Sasquatch type, mysterious cat-like beast. And so again, I was like, okay, forget whatever I'd been thinking about before. This is way more interesting. And it kind of developed from there. And like immediately, I was into it.
Yeah, I mean, Ralph is a fascinating character, and I suppose for me, watching the film, underlying it are these ideas of trust and faith and storytelling. How reliable a narrator did you think he was?
So hard for me to say. Yeah, I mean, I felt like I kind of wanted to pose that question with the film, sort of to ask the audience, you don't have to believe what he's saying, but I do believe what he's saying, and it was kind of what attracted me to him, I think, was this unique outlook that he has, which is kind of, he's open to things, and that was something that I wanted to kind of explore within myself, I guess, or something that I admired in him and wanted to kind of think about more. And yeah, reliable. He was very kind of aloof, and it was hard to ultimately to sort of have him be in the film. And it was a discussion that we had that on one particular day where I was up there for 2 weeks in total doing the filming, and it was getting close to the end of my trip there, and I really hadn't had any good time with him. I'd done all the other interviews and everything, and had spent enough time like wandering around, like getting some nature shots, but he just wouldn't answer the door. and I knocked him many times, but I didn't know where he was, and I had no way of contacting him. It was just a matter of like him answering the door. So then one day I kind of expressed to him that what I kind of wanted the film to be about, which was just as I said, his sort of perspective on life and kind of his relationship to nature, which I kind of wanted to try to access for myself and put in the film.
And how about the other contributors? How did you find all them? And were they? I mean, they all have quite. They all contrast quite overtly with Ralph. They seem much more normal people, I suppose. How did you? How did you find them, and what did you make of them and their stories?
Well, I found them mostly through word of mouth, but it was quite a small community where I was, and as soon as the kind of people heard that there was some guy there making a film about these big cat sightings. You know, a lot of people who had such a sighting in the area kind of found their way to me. But I put an ad out in the local paper where I had found a lot of stories already, and there's kind of that element in the film. But I've sort of, I found it fascinating to talk to them, mainly because it was this thing of you know, each of them had this experience that kind of came completely out of nowhere. Like, to see something like that, to see a big cat, and firstly, I totally believe that they've seen that. To see that, it kind of completely shakes what you kind of understand to be possible, and it was like that kind of moment. Some of them were scared, and but all of them kind of expressed this like wonder, this feeling of wonder, and this kind of magical moment that kind of comes completely out of nowhere. And I just thought that was quite, beautiful thing.
One thing I really love about the film is the way that your camera starts to find animals and beasts sort of everywhere, you know, from that tree with a face to the little frog that's sitting on the back of the chair, you know, and there's just so many of those. And it sort of reflects these fleeting glimpses of you know, of the big cat that they have. So and it forces us as viewers to kind of look harder, I suppose. Was that a deliberate strategy, or was that just something that kind of naturally you discovered in the edit?
It completely sort of it kind of took me by surprise, like being in their houses. You know, they're not like you know, for anyone who hasn't seen the film, it's, you know, the people that we're talking about are not you know, not crazy or anything. They express like a real reluctance to talk about this for like fear of being embarrassed, and, you know, fear of people saying that they're mistaken or that they're lying. And so being in their houses, you know, I just would notice like these little items, you know, the cat cushion, there's like, and now I'm like surrounded by faces of cats, and there's like cat stickers on the windows, and like, with the frogs. That was in Rachel's house, and she has hundreds of frogs. It was, it was like, okay, this is what I want my ideal house to be like.
We've got a question from Conor McGregor again. He says, I have a sister training to be a police officer who will likely be moving to Campbelltown as her first placement. Should she be scared of the cat?
Yeah, probably. I mean, you know, it's out and about, it turns out. Yeah, there are a lot of sightings around Campbelltown. You know, stay away from the woods at nighttime. That would be my advice.
And another question from Heather. The film's colourful subjects offer a nuanced humour to the tone, which really works with the mythical subject matter. Was this something you had in mind during filming, or did it come together in the edit?
The humour, yeah, I definitely would had that in mind throughout. You know, it's kind of like it's quite a surreal thing to be talking about, I guess. And, you know, I find, you know, my favorite type of comedy is quite absurd, I guess. And it is kind of absurd to imagine that there's big cats wandering around. And I think there's just quite a lot of opportunity for humor in that. But I absolutely I feel like when I started to tell people that I was doing this project before I went to film it, a lot of people kind of expected that I would be kind of taking the piss, or I don't know, like that. It's just so far from what I intended to do, and so it was a kind of a bit of a balancing act. I didn't want to like put in like, you know, anything that could be construed as making fun of the people who would talk to me, because I didn't think they were sort of funny in that sense. That's like not, I don't find it like that kind of funny. But there were some things that just are funny, and so yeah, I enjoyed there being a couple of laughs in the film.
Yeah, I mean, there's no way that you're not mocking anyone here, but yeah, there is a gentle humour to. I mean, we're all, I think anyone who invites a camera into their house, you're always going to find some kind of little details of absurdity in everyone's home, I think. Great, thank you. I'm going to move on to Kirsty and Opal. Can you talk first of all about how this project came into being and what inspired the story, and also how did you get it made? Because it's not through any scheme, but it's a quite a relatively sort of high budget. Well, it looks quite high budget anyway.
Well, it wasn't. So, it was like pulling favors in from everyone. Everyone there was there just volunteering their time. We shot over a weekend, so we got the kit in, for free, because usually the kit rental places are closed in. So yeah, so thanks for saying that, but it was literally made on like promises and like kind people. In terms of the actual story, I started writing it. It's quite hard to like pinpoint the actual inspiration, but I just knew I wanted to do something on family dynamics, and like I've always had this real interest in parents, and my dad always takes it personally and thinks I'm writing stories about how he's a bad dad. It's nothing to do with my parents. I just always think like the relationship you have with your parents, and then when they go from that almost like saint-like figure, when you're a child, if you have like a traditional household, usually you think they're almost like a saint, and then you see all these other dynamics and sides of them. So I wanted to kind of, Opal's in that space where she is learning her dad's craft of boxing, spending that time with them, and then you obviously see he's got this harsher side that he takes out on the brother Sean, and it's then when he gets ill, it's her time to deal with seeing her dad kind of vulnerable in that way. He's quite a like authoritative, overpowering figure, and then obviously he passes. Spoiler alert if anyone's not seen it, and she feels like she has to kind of step in, and I think it's her kind of thinking she wants to keep the dynamic that was in the household, because a lot of the time you have no choice over your family dynamic if you're a kid. That is just what you're brought into. So yeah, so I wanted to do something on that. The boxing, I don't know much about boxing, I have to say. Like, I've not got a keen interest. I just think it's like a very beautiful sport in a way, with how calculated you have to be and strategic, and I think that's not always known. I think a lot of times people just think it's hitting each other hard, so I wanted to so it was all these little things. I didn't actually have until about draft 7 of the script any dialogue. It was all just these little scenes, like little windows, which I think you can still tell in the script, in the film, when you watch it. So yeah, that was kind of the loose inspiration, and then it evolved into what it is now.
I mean, you set up the bond between the two of them really brilliantly in the opening scene, because it's such a close sort of bodily intimacy, and just the focus you have on his sheer sort of physical bulk, and I suppose it's very unusual to see this kind of this sort of almost blind adulation of a father figure who's an abuser to some degree. Did you do much research into the topic?
Well, I mean, yeah, I feel like just growing up, a lot of different families, and a lot of different people, and I think as well there's a lot in my from certain other aspects in not my direct family, but in the past there's been interesting dynamics between fathers and sons, or between marriages, and I think as well it's really pulling from this idea of when everyone kind of used to know everyone on their street. I feel like Opal could almost be set, you know, like in the 90s or something. It doesn't really have a set time, but no one's got a mobile phone, you know, and it's kind of just before that individualism stage. So, for example, when the dad and the brother are about to have a bit, you know, he's having a go at him for not getting the milk in the kitchen, and Sharon comes in and her first word is like, the neighbours will hear. Like, I wanted to kind of draw from that topic as well, that there's always this kind of hidden fear within a family of like how you are together and then what gets out. So in research, I feel in research, I don't want to seem like I took anything for granted or lighthearted in the subject, but yeah, I didn't really delve too much because I felt like everyone's kind of familiar with those dynamics already.
And can you talk a bit about how the relationship sort of develops as this really quite unsettling form of grieving after he dies?
How in the characters? Do you mean?
Yeah, like why were you? I mean, I suppose it's you know, it's fascinating the way she takes on his role after his death. I just wonder if you could talk a bit more about that, because that's what I find so fresh about this film is the idea of this daughter then feeling she has to fill that role and maintain that dynamic, you know, even though it's a really toxic dynamic.
Yeah, I think it's also because she still thinks her dad's, you know, one of the greatest people. She probably still did at that time, just because he was teaching her craft. They spent that time together, you know, where she wasn't seeing that side of him. She was getting to see this really like intelligent, almost gentle side of him when he was teaching her about boxing and defense. And that was a big thing, obviously, because at the end she doesn't defend herself. So it's that kind of literal punch in the face where it isn't ever going to be the same dynamic. She'll never take that place. So yeah, she's stepping in that way, by literally wearing the jacket and just wanting to kind of, you know, she's lost in a way as well, because her main figure in the house, or her main friend in the house, was her dad. Like, she doesn't have a lot with her brother and mum. So when that relationship's gone, she has that isolation. So it's almost trying to step in and keep the familiarity there as well.
And I mean, that climactic moment with the punch is such a powerful moment, because it's a dramatic switch for both her and her brother. You know, and I mean, it's really interesting to see how they react to it. And, you know, he finds himself capable of the same physical abuse, I suppose, as his father. And in a way, he almost just seems to accept that, the way he just sort of walks inside. Whereas for her, it's almost like a wake-up call, perhaps, that she thought she was the strong one, and she's just been knocked down. Can you talk a bit more about that moment and what that kind of means for each of them?
I think you kind of said it all. Yeah, I think it's kind of, she hasn't learned as much from life as she had hoped. You know, you kind of think you're going to be set up from life and what your parents teach you sometimes, or your parents would hope that they've set you up okay for life, and then of course that's not the case. And then for Sean, it is that constant, he's been managing to suppress it for quite a long time, anger, and yeah, it kind of gets released at the last moment. But I think that's also because Sharon's also, she needs something from him, you know, him to step in at that point. So yeah, I think you said it better than me, to be honest.
So we had a question from Fiona Wallace, which is maybe for you and for Elia. How important is it for the director to work with actors on developing their emotions, and how it informs their interactions as characters?
You can go first.
Yeah. It's an interesting question. I think I always say that I think a lot of the hard work is done at the casting stage and in terms of who you choose. And I always feel that I've been very lucky that I've found really brilliant actors that for me already feel like the character. I guess I cast people that feel not too far off the realm of what I imagine that character to be like in my head. So even in terms of like their mannerisms and things like that, because I think for me it really helps if as much naturalism comes through from them being themselves as possible. But I think in terms of Scuzz, you know, we did rehearsals mainly with the two leads, Paula and Keon, especially Keon. We found him through a school, and he had done some drama at school, but he'd never been in a film before, he'd never been on a set before or anything like that. So it felt really important to do some prep. And Paula as well, it's like a recent RCS graduate, but her experience was a bit more theatre heavy. So yeah, kind of trying to really get that dynamic between those two characters right. We did do a couple of days of rehearsals and really sort of work through what the shifts in their emotions and those dynamics are. But I do really feel like I found such brilliant actors that I was just very, very lucky to find them, really. But yeah, and yeah, I think the performances are probably my favorite. I mean, I like lots of things about the film, but I did make it. But the performances I feel really good about. Like I think they all did a really brilliant job.
And Kirsty, sorry.
Yeah, I think mine was I kind of managed to get some rehearsal as well. So what was it about the emotions with the actors? Sorry, what was the question?
The question was, how important is it for the director to work with the actors on developing their emotions and how it informs their interactions as characters?
Oh, okay. Yeah, I think I was the same. I managed to get some rehearsal time, which was really great because Megan, who plays Opal, she actually comes from a dancing background. She hadn't done a lot of boxing. And then Duncan Arley James is a champion kickboxer. So the rehearsal was also him teaching her boxing. So throughout that process, they actually built that relationship, which I think was really great. And then, you know, because we were filming it on no budget, it was filmed in a family friend's home. So it was really interesting on set, in between scenes, we were all just sitting in this family home. There was no escape, you know, we're all sitting in this condensed space. So I kind of really enjoyed playing on that with the actors and how they would interact with each other every day. And, you know, I think that helped a lot. You know, and then also it just turned out that Sean and Megan, who are playing brother and sister in this, are in a relationship in real life. So they luckily already had that, like they knew each other, they were familiar. But I think it was using that for each other. For example, Kirsty, who played Sharon, when she had to get upset for one of the scenes, I would make Ben, who played Sean, go and sit with her, because then they would have that support of each other, not just as actors, but then also as their characters. So I was just trying to find different ways to get them kind of bouncing off each other when we weren't turning over as well, which I guess on Scuzz you were kind of out in the streets, so you wouldn't have had that same opportunities.
Yeah, it was interesting. My favorite scene to have worked on in the film was the underpass scene, and I think that is because I'd done a lot of rehearsal with that scene, because that's really when the two characters, Kim and Ryan, meet, and there's so many changes in their kind of dynamic with each other and their attitude towards each other within that one scene. That was the one that, but we were quite heavy on in rehearsals. But it was great in terms when we came to shoot that, we actually just ran it as big long takes and we just did the full scene shooting each actor in each direction. And I think I kind of loved that because it almost became just like theatre, and in a way, like the actors had sort of were really in the moment and just doing all the work. And I was just like, Andrew, yeah, just that looks nice, just move about. And I was like, this is great, it's easy. So yeah, I think from that aspect, it was funny. You get to set and you're working with your actors and you can sort of feel the scenes that you all feel really sure about, and the ones where you're all a little bit more like, oh, you need to sort of try things and figure it out. But I think that scene we all felt quite good about. And so when it was just happening and watching the actors do it, I was like, this is like watching a play. This is really nice. Just stand back, let it happen.
Cool, thank you. So moving on to Rona with Sudden Death. We really loved this kind of deadpan deployment of a kind of Nordic noir detective show to explore real environmental concerns. What inspired you to choose that approach?
I guess I was watching loads of crime drama. And I kind of started because I wanted to make a film in a forest, and then coming across Galloway Forest Park, which has this kind of quite eerie feel to me, just because I didn't grow up surrounded by, how to say, I think maybe my notion of a forest is far too romantic. In a sense that obviously now loads of forests are industrialized forests and there's loads of maybe same trees and stuff. So I think for me going there, I had this like feel of like, something could happen in this area. Yeah, that's where, and yeah, enjoying crime drama. I think that then came together. And also when you do look up this area, there also has been crime. I mean, everywhere has been crime, but there was like anecdotes, crime anecdotes, if we can call this that way, in the area.
Could you talk a bit more about that idea of romanticism that's normally associated with the Scottish landscape? Because obviously you're drawing a sort of a contrast between that and the actual fact of the land being quite heavily managed. Can you talk a bit more about that?
Yeah, of course. Yeah, I think it was like, I think I moved to Britain like 5 years ago, and I was quite quickly struck by these big forests, industrial forests, and then also all the like quite big areas, obviously, of cut down trees, and finding it, something which is, I think, way more contemporary than maybe paintings or of forest that maybe I refer to when I'm thinking forest. And then also obviously in this area, it's not only the trees that are managed, but there's this whole, so the management zone, which I'm talk about in the film, that's an actual management zone that like you can quite easily find it on Google, that has been drawn on the map to kind of manage this disease. But then you've also got the managed wild goat, which just the words, obviously, like the wild goat park, like there's already something in the language that is quite nice to me. Also the deer park. So there's all these like wild animal elements that then are like lovely managed. There's even a forest drive, which unfortunately I couldn't do yet because it's closed in winter, but you can drive through the forest. It's like a lovely path where you can drive through with your car. And actually, well, that's just a bit outside the forest, but if you're ever there, there's like a red kite feeding station where a woman feeds like kites every day at 2, and there's like hundreds of red kites like coming and eating, and it's really quite bizarre. So I guess all these like managed things kind of like struck me there, because also like on a bigger scale, obviously we are very much managing nature for quite a long time, yet I somehow still managed to have a kind of like outdated understanding of it.
And then, I mean, maybe talk a bit more about the kind of the voice on the end of the walkie-talkie and this sort of clueless. Is he a superior or inferior? I'm not quite sure, but that kind of calling her back to the station. You know, what was?
Well,
what was
I get
the idea there.
I just wanted to be like a conversation with someone rather than like a monologue, and also finding it like a reason, in a sense, like a very like practical and valuable reason for having another character there. And I've worked with Stephen before. Stephen Smart is on the walkie-talkie, and yeah, I love his voice, and I think he's really great on the walkie-talkie. Yeah, and also I think this idea of like someone, or like this inspector in a way, going off and trying to investigate, but completely kind of losing it. I mean, that's if you're, I guess, like many of us, or for them, for those who like crime dramas, is quite a thing now. There's like this inspector, and they always lose their kind of shit, and then they go off or get really aggressive or drunk. I don't know. So yeah.
Tell us a bit more about because this was a kind of a collaboration between you and Holly McLean and sound designer William Aikman, whose name's cropped up on quite a few films this year, in fact. And we've previously shown a film by Holly McLean in the competition. Can you talk a bit more about that collaborative partnership?
Yeah, I think we started now, I want to say 3 years, but it might be longer or less, but rough. Yeah, I think we kind of met and just realized that we like each other and that we're good friends, but that we all either have a background or work in cinema, like professionally, but then do our own films. And Holly and I, we studied together at GSA in a master's, fine art, but kind of came to the like art video more in this kind of like film production way. Yeah, and then kind of like realized that we like to work together, and also that I think we like to work in different roles. So like we all quite then produce each other's films. And I particularly, I think we all enjoy this like stepping up or like taking over a different role for someone else, and starting doing Excel sheets and calling people. It's quite nice because actually you learn loads, and the pressure is very different than obviously when you do your own film. Yeah.
You're from Switzerland, is that right?
Yeah.
Yeah. Coming to kind of making a film in Scotland, is there something about a kind of a Swiss humor and British humor? You know, where were you thinking about how kind of your humor would be received by a British audience at all?
No.
No.
No. And in Switzerland, they think it's British humor. So, and also I must say that I tend to not start thinking that the film is going to be funny. I like I think all the films I've made, I'm always quite not serious. Obviously, also when you think you're going to make a funny film, you're also serious about it. But yeah, I'm not starting with the intention to make a film that may be going to be funny. But lucky if you were laughing, that's good.
Yeah. And we have another question from Conor McGregor, who says he thought he saw a lot of Wes Anderson influence in your film. Was that an influence? And if not, what were some other influences?
Probably not so much. I think one of the influence is actually a German crime series called Die Kommissarin, which is the inspector, but a female. And I think I pretty much copied their intro. I like in terms of rhythm and like the kind of shots. Yeah, so that, and then obviously I'm breaking quite hard with that after, and then I think it's quite a eclectic mix, going from also nature documentary presentation, obviously, where this person talks to the camera. That's definitely something that's always present somehow. Yeah.
Cool, thank you. We've got about 5 minutes left. There's a couple of questions come in. I have one for Cameron. Was Ralph, was he influential on the process of working out what the film was, would you say?
Yeah, definitely. It was kind of in like figuring out my relationship with him and sort of bringing him into the film was a kind of, it was a way for me to think about what it was really about, because I wanted it to be about him. And so to think like, why do I want it to be about him? Like asking myself that question basically kind of allowed me to kind of frame the film around him. And I mean, the whole time I was planning for him to say no and to not be in it. I'm so grateful to him that he did in the end agree to be filmed. But yeah, I mean, I can't even remember what my backup plan was going to be. I think it was probably going to be back to me, like wandering around, talking to myself. But yeah, it was definitely a big part of it. So just trying to tap into his way of thinking was absolutely crucial to what the film ended up being.
We've got a couple more questions, but first of all, have any of you got questions for each other that you want to ask?
I just thought it was very interesting, Rona, what you were just saying about this idea of romanticism that you have about nature, and what you were describing about sort of going to the forest and having this like eerie feeling. I sort of can really relate to that, and I kind of feel like both of our, I mean, maybe it's not an accident that our films ended up in the same sort of program together, but maybe it's like interesting to me that we kind of took that feeling in quite maybe even opposite directions, like you talking about how how nature is managed, and me talking about like something completely outside of that. So I guess if I had a question for you about that, it'd be no, go on.
No, I was just wanting to say it's funny because these Scottish wildcats, they have been very attractive to me for a long time, and I was like, there must be a film there. So it's nice to see that there is one now that I've seen.
Yeah.
And I have a question from Morven Cunningham. Hi, Morv. About where the title Scuzz comes from, Elia.
Oh, it's a good question. Yeah, so I guess I was trying to think. So I think Scuzz is actually sort of a genre of music in a way, and I also think it was the name of like a metal channel, like some kind of MTV equivalent back in the day. From my Googling, I found this out afterwards. But to me, it made me think of kind of distortion and like that scuzzy guitar kind of distortion. That's a way I would describe the music that I had in my head a little bit. And then to me, it also kind of evoked some idea of grit or dirt or something being a bit grimy, which made me think of Glasgow at nighttime. So I had it in my head from the get-go. I don't know if it is maybe the best choice of title, I'm going to be honest, because I think it is a little bit like, what does that mean? But I quite like short titles, and it was just a word that was in my head from when I started writing it, and I sort of stuck with it.
Cool. Well, that just about brings us up to an hour. So thanks everyone for watching. Thanks to those of you who sent in your questions. Do please remember to vote if you haven't already. You need to vote by watching all the films in a programme. Once you've watched them all, the voting opens up for you. And make sure you get your votes in by 4:30 tomorrow afternoon in order that they're counted for the Audience Award. So thanks to everyone for joining us, and thanks to Aaliyah, Cameron, Rona and Kirsty for being here, and enjoy the rest of the festival. Bye-bye.